Anthropic is the company behind Claude, the popular LLM model. So imagine as if we have something similar to the OpenAPI specification, but for AIs. It's a simplified protocol that uses JSON RPC for all the communication. It supports two different modes. One mode is a standard input and output. So this is for local MCPs, like local servers that are running just in your computer. The first iteration of the protocol was using servers and events. The new version of the protocol is using HTTP streaming to perform that operation. So it's a way to centralize that approach of executing tools and getting access to resources that the server is sharing. And you can think of it as if it's some sort of USB-C port for the net, for AI. That's what MCP is.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Modern Web Podcast. I am your host, Rob Ocel, the VP of Innovation at This.Labs, joined by my very favorite co-host, Danny Thompson, the Director of Technology at This.Labs. Danny, how are you doing?
Amazing, as always. The definition of perfection. It's a good day.
It is a great day, yes. And it's an even better day because we are talking to Julián Duque. Julián is the Principal Developer Advocate at Heroku in charge of Node.js, Ruby, and AI. Julián, how are you doing?
Hey, Rob, Danny. I'm doing pretty good. I think I'm with you, Danny. This is a perfect day so far.
That's right.
Right there.
Now, only Node.js, Ruby, and AI? Like, are you sure you're working hard enough over there at Heroku? Like, you're not going to get in trouble or anything, right?
No, only that. Of course, I do way more. I also take care of like event-driven architectures. Like, we have some other services that we provide, like a Apache Kafka or key value store, like Redis compatible store. I take care of other products, but mainly my main focus right now is going to be that Node.js, supporting the Ruby languages team, and this new thing called AI.
Yeah, this new thing about AI. I mean, that's part of what attracted our attention is, we've used Heroku at this dot with clients for years and years and years. Mm-hmm. It's always worked really well for us on the projects and that we've used it. But, imagine my surprise when I hear y'all's recent announcements of some of the really amazing kind of AI platform features that Heroku was announcing and sort of calling itself sort of the AI platform as a service. And so I was wondering if you could maybe go over some of the things that were just announced and some of the things that are really exciting about AI with Heroku specifically.
Of course. So we have been one of the first, I'm not going to say the first, but one of the first platform as a services out there. And we have been in the market for more than 12 years. And we are in this transformation process right now, becoming the AI platform as a service. But what does that mean? Usually what a lot of companies are doing is just they add a chatbot or an assistant and they call it AI and that's it, just to do like some sort of check mark. But back in November at AWS reInvent, we announced three things. One of those things is our Managed Inference and Agents platform, or for short, MIA, M-I-A. So what's that? What we are going to offer, or what we are offering, is a way for our customers and users to deploy AI applications and enable AI models with the same developer experience that Heroku is recognized for. We started asking ourselves this question: who is going to be building the Heroku for AI? And the answer was, well, of course, we are going to be building the Heroku for AI, adding this developer experience to enabling or deploying AI models to applications. So what we are offering today is, first, we have a set of models that you can add to your application, and those models are hosted on our infrastructure. So there is no risk of P2 or private data going outside to other third-party providers. And the models we support today are from Anthropic, Claude 3.5, 3.7, Haiku. We support Cohere for embeddings and Stable Diffusion for image generation. And we are working also on adding more models. So if a new model comes next week, we are going to be working on adding support to that model. And how can we enable those models on our applications? Just by running one command, or from the Heroku dashboard, just click enable, and we have the availability to use the API URL, API key, and it works. That's what we are offering.
You know, there's a lot of AI players right now. I was even talking to someone about this last night where they work for a financial institution and they're rolling out and building out a lot of their own AI tooling. And I said, you know, we're in this space, which is a very weird time, where there's so many new items to market. And with innovation happening at such a drastically fast speed, it almost seems like it's not as valuable at this current stage in time in the world of AI to create your own tooling, because we're in a stage where I'm starting to call it like disposable code, right? Like it's so cheap at this point to make code that I could literally make it with the expectation of just using it for like 60 days and then throwing it away to kind of create and crank out something brand new. But when it comes to some vendors, there's a couple that come to my mind. It almost seems worth it to just get the tool from them to use it, because you know they're going to dispose of whatever's there and bring in something new. Is this even in your mind or framework or roadmap when you're starting to like think of the tools that you're building and utilizing there?
Of course, and this is something that our team is committing to do, is that we are not just doing this just to catch up. We are doing this because we believe in the technology behind, we believe what we are doing and the value we are offering to our users. And every day, the team behind our AI offering is growing and is thinking on how can we add more value to this ecosystem. So besides, for example, just hosting models, I mean, I can use some other platforms for that. Maybe with a little bit more difficulty to do all the operation side of things, but like just hosting the model is not going to be something unique. But other things that are unique for what we are offering is the ability to enable agents, like an agentic approach to application. So the applications that are using our AI offering can also use MCPs that we host and maintain. For example, we have MCPs for code execution. So Heroku, you can spin up a Dino. Dino supports multiple languages through our build packs. So we support Node.js, Python, Go, Ruby, .NET, etc. So we have code execution MCPs that can let you run safely LLM-generated code on a one-off Dino. So if you have a process, you are working on a problem, you are asking that LLM to generate Go code to solve a specific issue using Go dependencies, and let Heroku execute that, it will automatically spin off a Dino, install dependencies, run the code, and return the response to you. So similar to what Google, Gemini, or OpenAI are doing with Python, but now you can select the language of your choice depending on what you are doing, and it will run safely on Heroku. And this opens more opportunities, because that code can also access, if you give permission to, can also access databases hosted on Heroku. So we have the database get schema and database run query MCPs that are going to have access to your data on Heroku, like read-only access to your data on Heroku, and be able to, instead of you building up or implementing a retrieval augmented generation application or giving access to an external tool to your database, everything is going to be running on a trusted environment. So those are the things we are doing, and constantly looking forward to see how can we enable our customers to rely more on these AI applications, but thinking about trust, because that's pretty much our number one value. Make sure that they trust in what we do.
You know, you said something, and I know the answer to this, but me knowing it doesn't do justification. I really respect your intelligence and opinion on this. I'm going to ask you this the exact same way someone asked me this last night. What the heck is MCP and why should I care?
what the heck is MCP? If you go to X or Blue Sky or like different blog platforms out there, you're going to see this acronym everywhere. So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, is an open standard created by Anthropic. Anthropic is the company behind Claude, this popular LLM model, that standardized the way of how LLMs, how AI models can extend their context by using a centralized way of, or a centralized protocol to understand resources that are being shared, prompts that are being shared, or enable them to execute tools. So imagine as if we have something similar to the Open API specification, but for AIs. So it's a simplified protocol that uses JSON RPC for all the communication. It supports two different modes. One mode is a standard input and output. So this is for local MCPs, like local servers that are running just in your computer and are getting the response through a standard input and output through a CLI execution, or over HTTP using streaming. The first iteration of the protocol was using server-send events. The new version of the protocol is using HTTP streaming to perform that operation. So it's a way to centralize that approach of executing tools and getting access to resources that the server is sharing. And you can think of it as if it's some sort of USB-C port for the net, for AI. That's what MCP is. And a lot of people ask themselves, well, why I don't use REST, or why I don't use my typical APIs to do this? Implementing APIs, even though I'm using REST, or even though I'm using Open API specification, people implement the APIs differently. The objects they return are going to be complex objects. And usually with LLMs, we are dealing with text. So this is why the specification, where when I define tools, I can specify the parameter, like the input parameter, as a complex schema, but usually I'm returning a string, something that the LLM understands, can add to their context, and the LLM can process that information and give you the response in natural language. So it's a kind of a little bit more a simplified API interface that is themed just specifically for LLMs to use. When this is used, mostly applications that relies on LLM models. For example, the first one was the Cloud desktop application. So you can enable these tools to the Cloud desktop application. Let's say initially Claude didn't have the way to search or browse the web. You can enable an MCP that does that uses an external service that perform a search, let's say the Brave API, and extend that capability to the Cloud desktop. Or if you want to give it access to the file system, or as we released recently, you can give access to that application to deploy to Heroku with the Heroku MCP server. And other applications have been adding MCP support, like pretty much the IDEs that uses AI right now. Visual Studio Code with Copilot now support MCPs, Cursor IDE, Windsurf, etc. You can extend functionality through this centralized protocol, which is the Model Context Protocol by Anthropic.
Yeah,
I hope
it's funny hearing
all of these things I explain myself.
Yeah, it's funny hearing people say, like, hey, why can't it just go off of REST? Listen, even for you large enterprises out there, I've seen your API documentation. You do not want AIs going raw off your API documentation, all right?
Yeah. And the thing is that this is an ever-evolving and really, really fast-paced ecosystem. Every week, there is something new going on. Not only around tooling, but models, and there is this kind of like a a space race, all of these big companies trying to get the fastest and better model out there. And I mean, what the whole ecosystem is doing is playing catch up and making sure they are adopting these standards. Initially, it was something just by Anthropic, and it got that much popularity that OpenAI, an Anthropic competitor, had to say, okay, we hear you. We are going to support MCP in our agentic offering.
It's really interesting, right? Because I feel like I've seen this in Vercel's V0 for a long time. Like they have a section where you can define the operations, the remote operations that are available for the the LLM to operate on. But hey, listen, just like the same way that Skype existed, but Zoom was the one that we all say when we have a remote call with everybody, right? Yahoo is first, Google is the one that we all remember. It's just funny which one the community lifts up. I think that's what was more shocking to me. It wasn't necessarily saying, what is this thing? I mean, it was, because I was surprised this version of it is. I think everyone's so excited by what it'll enable. I think it was just shocking how fast it became seemingly the unquestioned universal standard across the whole community. That was what was surprising to me. Like we take a long time to coalesce around anything, but it seemed like the community it was like a fire swept across everything.
Yeah, and one thing is that the developer experience with MCP is not there yet. If you go to a site and you want to install an MCP within your IDE, it is not easy. I mean, you need to open a JSON file, add certain things, generate an API key, make sure you have certain tools installed so the MCP is able to execute, even if it is NPX from the Node ecosystem or UVX from the Python ecosystem, or if it is a binary, you have it installed. So there is still no improved developer experience around MCP. There is a lot of rough edges, but the ecosystem is working to improve those. Every day I see new toolings of how can I easily install an MCP on my cloud desktop application. There is also like a CLI tool to do so. So it's improving. And also there is this other question, which is, okay, I have these two types of MCPs. One is the local one, the STDIO one, and the other one is the HTTP. But what about security? Of course, if I'm going to expose an MCP, if I'm going to expose a service through HTTP, how I'm going to be handling security? And just recently, with the new iteration of the MCP protocol, they start implementing OAuth. It wasn't there before, so you had to roll your own authentication. So it's a ever-evolving ecosystem. What we are doing at Heroku is working on a way for customers to host and deploy their own MCPs, like the web-based MCPs. So if you have a service that you want to expose and you want to have it secure and you want to have it available, the same Git push Heroku main experience that you do today for your web applications, something similar is going to be enabled for these.
So that's for customer-facing applications. Like yes, I want to allow customers of my service to be able to access that.
Exactly. So instead of, okay, this is something for you to deploy and figure it out how it runs, now install this in your application and you're going to be accessing the remote resources that I'm hosting with the authentication layer, etc. So that's another of the offerings we are doing. Remember I told you the name is Managed Inference and Agents. So Managed Inference is just I host the models, and Agents is what can I offer on top of that to enable agentic AI applications. And that's MCPs, access to tools, and an infrastructure to deploy these applications to Heroku.
You said that the developer experience is not there right now, but I feel like there's a very big specific reason why, and it's because of the immaturity of it. Like when JavaScript first came around, was new kid on the block, there was definitely no developer experience. Until we get to a mature stage, I don't necessarily see that changing. But it's definitely made me wonder what the developer experience could potentially look like down the road. mainly because I see all these new tools. Like one prime example, Warp has been a terminal tool that I've been messing around with a lot lately, which I have really enjoyed the experience with. But now it's made me think, when we start getting into the world of vector databasing or even instituting RAG or even MCP for that example, I don't know what I would look for in like a well thought out developer experience at this current stage, because I even feel like the current stage of MCP may evolve even more as new iterations and new versions come along. Like, have you thought about this?
One thing that I believe is missing is a centralized registry of MCPs. This problem has been solved for many other ecosystems. You execute npm install,
The NPM of AI.
cargo install or something like that. Yeah, where is the MCP install? Like that centralized registry. There is a multiple sites. You go to cursor.directory and there is a bunch of MCPs listed, but that's just a website that will take me to a set of instructions of how can I install that MCP into my application. And as I told you, it will involve updating a JSON file at hand and generating tokens or doing some stuff. But it could be improved, like centralized registry, maintain with security audits on top of the MCPs that are published, a way for people just to click install or execute a command, something like MCP install, and now it is available on my app. That's something that is missing. Second, if you are using MCPs with Cursor, there is a limit of the number of tools that Cursor can use. And this is a limit pretty much imposed by an LLM. You can only use 40 tools. If you start adding more MCPs and you go over those 40 tools, Cursor cannot guarantee that the correct tools are going to be selected. Where is a way to perform, let's say, a search? So like LLMs can first search for the available tools before fetching all of them, or a way to have name spacing. Okay, if I have two MCPs that have the same tool name, how can I name space and be able to see, okay, I want to use the deploy from the Heroku MCP or the deploy from the Vercel MCP. So which one I'm going to use depending on the MCPs that I have enabled. So that's things that are missing that are going to definitely improve the developer experience on using MCPs.
Yeah, I want to talk even a little bit more about the Heroku MCP portion that you're talking about, because I think there's a portion of this which I think is not in enough people's imaginations, because I think a lot of people are thinking about how they can expose their data to customers with MCPs. But I've been so fascinated by this idea of like making sure you have MCPs for all your internal tooling and your internal systems, because of this idea of saying, you know, if I'm not particularly skilled or somebody on my team is not particularly skilled with setting up the infrastructure, the idea that I can say, hey, I need to spin up a new instance of I need this hardware, this hardware, this hardware. It has to be able to communicate to this system and work inside of this, you know, this virtual network, et cetera, and it sort of go and agentically execute that for you with full context of how your system is currently set up and how you would do that with your standards and your guidelines. I just think it's so cool, and it's something that we've not had anything nearly available like that to deal with, not just for infrastructure, but we could apply this everywhere. So I'm wondering, like, what are some of the things maybe that you've already seen or that customers have tried or that you've tried with this that's maybe surprised your team as they've sort of realized what these new features will allow them to do?
Sure. And to give you a little bit of context, we have one super important developer tool that is the Heroku CLI. You can do everything on the Heroku platform through the Heroku CLI. And the Heroku MCP server is pretty much a wrapper on top of that CLI to enable the most popular tools so an LLM can perform actions on Heroku. And it's pretty well grounded, like each tool is grounded so the LLM knows how to properly use this tool for certain operations. So, for example, in one of the demos we were doing, we asked the agent, this was on Cursor, we ask the agent, okay, take a look at my application and see if it is properly scaled. If it is not properly scaled, adjust the number of dynos my application is running on. So what the MCP did was first recognize which application we were talking about to the current context. Okay, I'm in this code base. I'm talking about this application. Okay, now I have the app. Second, I need to understand how this application is working. Let's go and fetch the logs and read the number of requests per second and information that I have on my logs. Then it does its magic. Now this is the LLM doing the calculation. Then fetch the application info. Okay, this is running on 4 dynos. And last, it says, okay, you are over provisioned. You only need 2. Do you want to scale to 2 dynos? Yes. And immediately switch the application to 2. And that was just one interaction with the agent. Things like, okay, I need to fetch the health of my database and give me recommendations. How can I improve it? It have access to our add-ons marketplace, so it can also recommend you if you need to scale, like the database size, or if you are not following production best practices. Let's say you are missing an add-on that takes care of observability or logging, it will recommend you to do that. You can deploy a full application from the agent, scale, analyze logs. It's pretty good at doing self-healing. When you are asking to do a deployment, it does the deployment, and if the deployment fails, it will read the logs. Oh, you are missing a dependency. Do you want to add this dependency to your package.json? Yes. Add it, try again the deployment, and automatically succeed. Those are things that I can do, but it will take me time. It will take me time to read the logs, to do the troubleshooting. Now this is doing it automatically through the agent. Of course, it's super important to be able to have these tools request permission before executing something, because people try to do the vibe coding, YOLO, do everything automatically, and AIs make mistakes, and it can start deciding to do certain things like, hey, I think that your database is not good. I'm going to drop it and add something else. And you don't want to have that on a production application. So always need to have like human supervision. So it's super important that you also know what you are doing while using these tools, because it's going to help you. It's going to take you there. It's going to make you a little bit more productive, but it's not going to replace you.
Does having the ability to host MCPs and just for more people to deploy them, does that take away maybe from some of the priority on implementing AI features in some ways externally? And by that, what I mean is it just feels like if I can give someone access to the APIs effectively of my system for your models, you can then take my systems and my interfaces and put them into any sort of agent or model that you want to operate in, where it seems like a lot of people have been spending time trying to build the APIs and the interfaces that you have to go into to interact with their data. Is there some thought here that like MCPs are maybe a first stop or a best stop here for people to consider if the goal is to expose what you have to other people's agentic workflows wherever they happen to be executing them?
So yeah, this is going to be for those services that want to expose something to the public, or companies that want to expose their own services internally through, of course, an authentication layer. But the MCP, the MCPs just perform the operation. It is built to execute. It is just the logic, the API. It doesn't have the reasoning. The reasoning is going to be what is calling the MCP. And now it is the choice of the implementer or the person that is using those MCPs, what model are they going to use. And that's a good thing, because there is a whole ecosystem of models that you can use. If you want to use local models through Olama, or you are going to use hosted models on OpenAI, Anthropic, or Google Gemini, or if you are going to use self-hosted models through AWS Bedrock, Heroku, or some other platforms, it gives you the choice of pick both. What's the logic that I'm going to be executing, and what's the reasoning engine behind that's going to select and run those tools. So that's what it's doing here. But I don't see like services implementing both reasoning and tool executing in one thing. So you can like mix and match those two.
You know, I've been thinking about this as we've talked, right? And one thing that I'm starting to think about now, like as you've deployed or maybe even interacted with like GPT-based back services on Heroku, like what are some of the biggest scaling challenges that you've encountered that you think maybe people should be aware of when they're trying to think about how they architect their solutions? Is there something that like should come into consideration for them as they're designing these solutions for themselves?
Yes. The first thing that I personally have encountered and I have seen other customers are struggling with is dealing with the context window, right? Each model has a specific context window. What does that mean? It's the amount of tokens or the amount of information that the LLM can process in one go, in one request. And usually if we want to have a smart agents or smart applications, we need to have a well-grounded context. And we increase this context or ground this context either through retrieval augmented generation or through using MCPs to get something that augments that context. Or we have a memory approach. If we are on a conversation, we are enabling a memory approach. So it knows what we have been talking in that whole conversation session. So it remembers and it can act based on that memory. But if you want to scale properly, make sure to first understand the context limitations of the model you are using. Second, implement a proper way of handling that memory. Because if it is grow more than what the model can handle, it might fail or it will start hallucinating. If you have like a rolling context window and there is something huge and at the end you have a bigger context that the LLM cannot process, it will start hallucinating and giving you wrong answers. So the first thing is understanding the model you're using, the context limitation, and the other parameters to optimize the model, like the temperature, top K, etc. Second is there like part of RAG or some other agentic operations, things that you are going to repeat a lot. How can we catch those pieces of context so we don't need to execute the tool or go to the vector database every time that I'm asking a question? So now there are solutions like Redis, for example, are implementing a pretty good way of catching prompts and caching LLM actions for agents. And specifically, they released something recently around having catch support for applications built with LangChain. LangChain is one of the most popular frameworks to building agentic applications with Python and TypeScript. And now it has like pretty good support, both code and on the server, to enable that catch layer for your applications. Some other thing is that where I'm going to be doing the ML operations, where do I need to be hosting prompts that I'm going to be reusing? So there are like some other aspects that I need to consider in the architecture to be able to have something that it's usable. And the other thing is the trust aspect. LLMs make mistakes. If you are not properly grounding your prompt, if you are not properly giving enough context, if you are not adding the guardrails, there are things that are going to be out of control. So before releasing an application, make sure you do an extensive test so the application is not vulnerable to new vector attacks for LLM applications, like prompt injection, tool poisoning. There are like some other new vulnerabilities that are being exposed thanks to these new type of applications and the pace that they are like being released. So that's also another consideration that you need to take into account before going to production. Make sure that the application you are building, it is not toxic or biased. So there is another way you need to test and make sure that your application is working on that aspect and it is not, getting out of control due to toxicity. Well, what else? There are like many things. If you are using vector databases, make sure you are indexing the information properly. You are using the proper algorithm to fetch the information. You are using the proper models to embed the text to add to the vector database. This is a whole new world. This is not your typical 3-tier application. This is a whole new world. And for me, it's exciting because it gives us the opportunity to learn a bunch of new things.
Listen, it's definitely exciting, and it's a great time to learn. And Heroku's always been a great platform for people to learn. I mean, whether you're enterprise or your project, I mean, you're just a hobbyist. That's what we've always loved about it. Is if you need something, you just pull it in, you install, and you're up and running. So hopefully, this gives people an opportunity and a chance to play with things in ways they haven't, especially in production systems. So for people that are interested, both of the things that we talked about today, as well as the things that y'all just announced, all the managed inference stuff, can you let people know maybe where they can find? How to get started with that, and then also, for anybody that wants to maybe reach out to you and pick your brain or see, what you have going on, where they can find you online.
Of course, first and foremost, Heroku.com is going to be the easiest way to get all of the information. There in our main website, you are going to find our recent announcement on the Managed Inference and Agents. You can reach out to me either on X with @Julián_Duque. You can find me on Blue Sky @JuliánDuque.co. And LinkedIn, you search Julián Duque and the bold bird, the smiley guy. That's me. You can add me and I will be more than happy to support you and answer any question after this episode gets published. And one thing that I want to tell people before we close is, don't be afraid of these new tools. Don't be afraid of this new way of doing things. I've heard a lot of people with this panic that AI is going to replace developers or AI is going to replace us. That's not the reality. But I do believe that a person that really knows how to use AI is going to replace the person that doesn't. So spend the time, go ahead, experiment, at least learn how to properly prompt and interact with an AI tool, and then start like going and build something, build an MCP or build a chatbot or something that uses this technology. It is the best time to do it, and every day there is a new tool that is going to help you get there.
Well, great. Well, that's going to be it for us today. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this Modern Web podcast. And thanks, of course, to our guest, Julián. As always, we say the conversation does not stop here. You can find Julián online at all of the links we put in the show notes down below. You can find me online at RoboCell. As for Danny, you can find him online at dthompsondev. For the podcast, you can find us online at moderndotweb.com or on Twitter at modern.web. And as we round out, we'd just like to thank today's sponsor, This.Labs, one last time, who would like me to remind you that sometimes it's hard to bridge the gap between business objectives and tech implementation, and it can get messy. This is trusted by top names like Meta, Google, and T-Mobile, and they love helping business leaders fulfill their strategic digital initiatives. Check them out at this.co. One more time, that's THISDOT.co. All right, thanks everybody. See y'all next time.